The Season 9 patch notes are here, and that means the meta is about to change. There are new winners and new losers. But not every change matters. So today, we're cutting through the noise and breaking down what you actually need to know. The guns that received huge buffs, the few that got nerfed, and the long list of changes that do absolutely nothing. This video will be your guide to the Season 9 update. Let's start with the biggest winners. Kicking off the big winners list is the CBR4. It received 2 buffs this season. First, its base range was increased from 11, 17, and 25 meters up to 13, 20, and 28 meters. Now, on its own, that won't make it significantly better, as the main issue with the CBR4 has always been its 4-shot kill consistency. But guess what? It also received a stomach multiplier buff, going from 1.0 to 1.1. And this is the buff that changes everything. It will make the 4-shot kill much more consistent in that second damage range. Before, with a good gunsmith build, this was half consistent up to 21 meters. Now, it will be consistent up to around 25 meters. The CBR4 was already a fast-firing, high-mobility, easy-to-handle SMG. Now it has decent damage on top of all that. I wouldn't be surprised to see players coming back to the CBR4 after this. Next up, a gun that received a huge set of buffs, the Fennec. First, it got an ADS time reduction, going from 200 down to 180 milliseconds, making it much better in run-and-gun scenarios. Second, it received a major flinch reduction, dropping from 1.5 down to 1.25. Considering many of us build the Fennec to stack flinch resistance, this is a really nice buff. And lastly, the extended barrel attachment got a boost, now providing a 20% range increase, up from the old 10%. So, what does this all mean? Overall, this isn't going to make the Fennec the single best CQC SMG, but it absolutely makes it a viable alternative to the VMP in some scenarios, which is a huge step up for the gun. But for a CQC gun like the Fennec to truly be viable, every millisecond counts. That 180 millisecond ADS time is useless if your connection adds its own delay. You could be losing fights simply because of an unstable network. That's why having a stable foundation for your connection is so important, and that's why I use ExitLag Mobile. It's a simple app that finds a more stable, direct route to the game server, keeping your ping low and consistent. It does this with over 1,000 servers worldwide and works for over 800 mobile games, not just COD Mobile. Think of it as a small buff that ensures your fast reactions aren't wasted by a slow connection, and it's incredibly simple to use. You just find your game and tap one button. So, a huge thank you to ExitLag Mobile for supporting the channel by offering you all a free trial. You can try ExitLag Mobile for free for 3 days using my link in the description or the QR code on the screen. And if you like it, use my code KIT for over 15% off a subscription. Alright, with that said, let's get back to the patch notes and our final big winner. Our final big winner this season is the HVK30. It received a buff to the upper arm multiplier on its large caliber magazine, increasing it from 1.2 to 1.4. What this means in practice is simple. A major boost to its consistency. You will have an increased 3-tap consistency in close range, and an increased 4-shot kill consistency in mid-range. The HVK was already a really good pick in slow game modes. With this buff, it is now simply one of the best options for TDM, frontline, and search and destroy. Alright, those are the big winners of the Season 9 patch. Now let's move on to our next category, the interesting tweaks. These are smaller, more nuanced buffs that hardcore players will want to know about. First on our list of interesting tweaks is the Krig 6. It received 2 multiplier buffs. A slight one to the chest, going from 1.2 to 1.25, and one to the upper arms, going from 1.0 to 1.1. Now, that doesn't really change anything major, but it will slightly increase the 3-shot kill potential in the gun's first damage range. It's a small detail, but it's still something. Next up for tweaks is the EM2. It received a lower arm multiplier buff, going from 1.0 up to 1.1. Now, here's why that's a bigger deal than it sounds. When you combine this buff with a multiplier boost from the Task Force barrel, the lower arms now have a 1.2 multiplier. This massively increases the 3-tap consistency of the EM2, making it, once again, one of the most consistent 3-tap weapons in the game. Our next category is the wildcard. It's for a single gun that received a buff so mysterious and potentially powerful, it gets its own section. Let's talk about the M16. It received a couple of buffs specifically for the wildfire perk. First, the flinch penalty was reduced significantly from 15% down to only 5%. But the second buff is the real mystery. The patch notes say it received a buff that reduces horizontal and vertical recoil. Now, we don't know what greatly means in terms of numbers, but this could be huge. If this buff makes the M16 easy to use, it might just enter the long-range AR discussion. We'll have to test it to know for sure, but this is a great buff, potentially. Alright, that covers all the important buffs. Now let's talk about the nerfs. And this season, there's really only one that's worth mentioning. The MG42. It received a couple of small mobility nerfs. First, the boost from the skeletal stock has been reduced from 35% down to 24%. And second, the movement speed penalty on the 250 round magazine has been increased from 2% up to 5%. Now, this is not going to radically change anything about the gun, but it is still a nerf. And for our final category, let's cover the other minor buffs from this patch. These are the changes that don't really change the meta, but are still worth knowing. The Swordfish received 2 minor buffs, a slight fire rate increase with the Halberd mag, and a sprint to fire delay reduction of 6 milliseconds. Yep, 6 milliseconds. As I said, nothing serious. The KSP-45 received 2 buffs. Its second damage range was increased from 25 to 30, and its ranges were extended from 16 to 25 out to 19 to 28 meters. Again, this isn't going to change a lot, but I know a few people really like using it, so it's going to be easier to play with now. The Pharaoh's third damage range was buffed from 21 to 24 meters, its hair spread was reduced, and its stun gun attachment now hits up to 10 meters, up from 7. Again, nothing crazy. The Chopper received minor improvements to its BSA, sprint to fire time, and strafe speed. Overall, nothing interesting here. The Razorback received 2 buffs, a tiny range increase with the rapid fire perk from roughly 6 to 13 out to 7 to 14 meters, and a slight chest multiplier improvement. Honestly, neither of these changes will affect anything. Nothing interesting here, but they're in the patch. The LK24 had its ADS speed increased a little. It's nice, but not game-breaking. And finally, the Grau 556 got a bullet spread buff for the Archangel barrel, which would be great if we actually use that attachment. But since we don't, it's kinda useless. And that covers every weapon change you need to know about for the Season 9 patch. So, now you know exactly which guns are meta after the Season 9 update. But that knowledge is useless if your aim isn't on point. If you feel like your aim is still holding you back, the video on your screen is the most important one you can watch.